to be here. My my experiences with you and your fireside chats are I always get more out of it than I bring, I'm sure. And I'm just really thrilled to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much. Well, so I read your bio a while ago, and you are actually helping persons to live their lives and to fulfill their purpose. And this very book that I show here, I highlighted here, you're actually using that book. You have gone through the teachings and the course of Shirzad Shamin, and you're actually using this book in your practice to help others. And so, we thought that this would be such an excellent way to talk about what is happening. So in the book, Kim, he talked about three main characters. He talked about the judge, the saboteurs, and the sage. But before we go to that, I want you to give us a little background on this book and why you think it's such a great book for persons to read or the course to do.
Yes, well, as you know, I've all my life I've just read everything I can get my hands on about personal transformation and about reaching our potential. And that's just a subject that has always fascinated me. But I noticed through the years that when we gain insight, we get excited about it, and then we implement it, but over time that excitement kind of fades away, and it kind of levels off. And so I've always been really looking for the sort of the missing link that helps us to have this transformation be lasting over time. And so this work is really that missing link. And what I found was it's kind of like you can kind of this work is kind of like an operating system. If you think of your phone, and your phone has an operating system on it, and then you can run lots of different apps on that operating system. Positive intelligence works kind of like that. It's the operating system, and then we can take pieces, we can take different books, different approaches to transformation, and plug them into this operating system, and that helps us to make that change last over time. And so when I realized what he's put together here, I got so excited and took the training, and I had some very major breakthroughs myself, and people that I'm taking through the program are having some of the same experiences, and it's wonderful. I'm so excited about it.
Wow. I like the analogy that you use when you talk about the operating system, because that's such a great way to define what we're going to be talking about tonight. And all of the pieces coming together to make sure that that system works perfectly. So when we talk about this book, Kim, in the book, he talked about three main characters. As I said before, he talked about the judge, he talked about the saboteurs, and he talked about the sage. I want you to kind of help us to understand each of these characters and in your own word, how can we really determine which character we are dealing with at different points in time?
Great question. Okay, so understanding these three characters is really fundamental to understanding this work. And so that's a great place to start. We'll start with we think we have one brain, but we really have two brains. And our brains are divided, some people say right brain, left brain, and I won't get into the technical the technicalities of all of that, but part of our brain deals with keeping us safe. So if it's the fight, flight, or freeze mode, some people call that the reptilian brain. But this is what over time has kept humans safe. So if we put our hand on the stove and it's hot, we know instantly. We don't even think about it. We know instantly that we're going to take it off of there because we feel that pain. And so this part of the brain we're going to call the saboteur brain, but it is tasked with keeping us alive, basically. So we're mortal people and we're in a dangerous world, and we need the tools that that brain gives us to help us stay safe and alive. But that's our survival brain or our saboteur brain. So that's on one side. On the other side, we have the brain that houses positive emotions like empathy and creativity and love and all of those positive emotions. That's a completely different part of our brain. When we have something happen in our circumstances, our brain is conditioned to go to the saboteur brain. If something bad that we maybe recognize as bad happens to us, almost automatically, or actually automatically, there's a neural pathway that goes from that stimulus, and it's conditioned to go right to the saboteur brain. And that's where all the negative emotions reside: anxiety, fear. All of the emotions in the saboteur brain are driven by fear. So that's where we feel anxiety and any emotion that's going to make us upset. What we found, well, not what we found, but what scientists have found, brain scientists, is that we can actually develop the neural pathways that go into the other part of the brain, the sage brain. And we do that by developing that muscle. And we'll talk about that a little later. But so in short, the saboteur brain and the sage brain. The saboteur brain is motivated by fear. The sage brain is motivated by love. The judge, that's the other character. That's one of the saboteurs. There's actually nine. There's everybody has the judge. That's the primary saboteur in our survival brain. And the judge operates by judging ourself, judging others, and judging our circumstances. There's 9 accomplice saboteurs. We're not going to have time to talk about all those tonight, but like the controller, restless, hyper rational. My judge is number 1, and then my second one is pleaser. My third one is hyperachiever, or my second one is hyperachiever, and my third one is avoider. And everybody is different. Everybody has a different combination, but you have the saboteur brain, the sage brain, and within the saboteur brain is the judge and all of the accomplice saboteurs.
Wow. This is so interesting because you talk about the brain, we actually having two brains. And the that brain that we call the saboteur brain is the one that tries to keep us safe, or it's where all the fear is. So we are walking down the road and the car is coming towards us. Right away, we get into that side of the brain where we become fearful. The negative emotions start to flow. That's what you're actually saying. Am I
Yes,
correct? And
yes,
and that instant reaction is usually made at that side of the brain.
yes.
And sometimes I wonder why the instant reaction wouldn't be on the sage side. Why, when something happens, we usually go directly to that side before we go to the sage side. And I guess we can talk about that as we go later in the brain, why the reaction is always to think the negative most of the times before we switch back to the positive side of the brain. But this is so interesting. And you actually said yours is your number one is the pleaser. Did you say that?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. What are some of the what are some of the highlights of the pleaser? What would you say are some of the highlights of someone having that pleaser saboteur?
Well, the pleaser is it's just that word is a pretty good description. The pleaser wants to make everybody happy. The pleaser feels like they're responsible to make other people happy, and they want to do everything they can do to make that happen. And so the pleaser will oftentimes sabotage themselves so that someone else will like them or somebody else will approve of them. And the saboteurs are actually strengths that we have taken too far. And so the pleaser is typically people who are empathic. They care about people. They like to serve people and help people. But the saboteur has taken that too far, so that they do way too much to please other people around them, so people will like them. And that, as you can imagine, doesn't work great in the business world or even in relationships.
And I'm glad that we are talking about this because when we think about the saboteurs, particularly you just mentioned the pleaser, we can do something to be able to bring them into a greater space. When I say a greater space, bring them more to the other side where the sage is.
Yes.
And that is where the beauty of things is. You don't have to stay in the same position. We're talking about the power of personal transformation. And that's where the power is, because we don't have to stay the same way for the rest of our lives. We can change, we can be transformed.
That's
So you
right.
talk about the pleaser, and earlier you mentioned that the judge is that master one. Talk to us a little more about this judge and how and you know in what ways does the judge show up in our lives daily?
The judge shows up differently for everyone, and it's very interesting. He can be, I say he, I don't know if it's he or she, but the judge can be very subtle and very sneaky. The judge can also be very aggressive. It kind of depends on how we've developed over time, I guess. My judge is not loud or aggressive, but is very like just discrediting me all the time. Like you're just, no wonder you're in this position again. You're always going to be this way, and you're never going to be able to. He's just very not loud, but just very critical. And so again, the judge will judge self. The judge will judge others, and typically, when we're feeling judgment of others or passing judgment on others, that's always driven by negative emotions. And then we judge our circumstances. So, I wish I had more money, or I wish I had a fancy car. If I had a doctorate degree, I'd be happy. Or, our circumstances just never are quite right. I'll be happy when. And then we get to the when, and we discover that we're not happy. And then we think, oh, well, I'll be happy when this happens. And so some people have a very aggressive, mean judge. Some people have a very subtle, kind of sneaky judge. But once once you learn how to recognize the judge, then you kind of learn how the judge approaches things, and you can instantly recognize what's going on once you kind of go through the exercises of learning how he works with you.
And that judge, Kim, is that consistent voice that you hear in your head, that consistent voice that you hear talking to you, like literally, it's telling you what to do, why you should do this, why did you not do that. But most of the times, you said yours is more quiet, yours is not shouting.
Yeah.
I personally believe that because I am more of a hyper person, my judge tend to try to put fear in me. Like whatever my judge is saying in my mind wants me to feel fearful, like you can't do that because, or if you do that, this may happen. And so that judge, I believe, Kim, shows up in so many ways for different people. And I'm sure there are going to be so many questions that we can talk about tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in this room and we're talking about such an important topic. We're talking with Kim Palmer, and we're talking about the power of life and personal transformation. Because in order for our life to be transformed, we have to get to know ourselves, and we got to get to know the limiting beliefs and the things that are holding us back. And as he was explaining, most of the times it's these saboteurs, which is called that those voices, those that negative talk in your mind that keeps telling you what to do and what not to do. I like how you talk earlier, Kim, about um, it doesn't just judge you, it judge others and it judge circumstances. Give us like an example of how it judge others and how it would judge circumstances.
Well, say for instance, the example that comes to mind would be, say you're working with a team at work on a project, and you have to brainstorm and try to come up with some ideas to move this project along. Well, somebody gives an idea and you immediately shoot it down. Oh, that's a horrible idea. That'll never work. Um, and and that brings when you do that, that brings that negative emotion into the whole group. We have what we call, I'm kind of getting off track here, but we have mirror neurons that we recognize the energy that other people are bringing. And so if we are going to judge something like that in the group, that's going to be contagious to everybody in the group. And it's going to take the energy and of that meeting right down. That's just one example. Excuse me, I'm gonna have to get a drink of water. Now I've forgotten your question.
No, no. And how does it judge circumstances? Because you just shared how it
Oh,
judges the person, the others. Mm-hmm.
well, circumstances is, I think we all experience this at some level. We're not happy with our circumstances, and we don't think we can be happy in our current circumstance. Our judge tells us there's no way we can be happy if this is going on. In reality, happiness is a choice of our sage brain. And so the judge tries to keep us in our saboteur brain, our survival brain, and keep us judging those circumstances so that we can't feel the happiness if there's even one little tiny thing about our circumstances that isn't working for us. The sage brain handles that a different way. We all know that we want to move forward, we want to progress, um, we want to better our circumstances. That's a very honorable human trait. If we do that from the sage brain, we use discernment and not judging. And so we can say I'm wanting to be a billionaire, and I won't be happy until I'm a billionaire. My sage brain would handle that completely differently than my survival brain would. And so the point is not that we don't want to change our circumstances. The point is how we approach that change and how we which side of our brain we're working on that with, because the survival brain is only capable of feeling negative emotions. The sage brain is only capable of feeling positive emotions. And so if we're wondering if this is our judge or one of our other saboteurs that's making us feel that way, all we have to do is figure out if we're feeling negative emotions or positive emotions, and that tells you exactly which brain you're in.
Wow, this is very interesting. We are learning so much at the fireside tonight, talking about the negative thoughts, the negative emotions, and how we are uh, created, made with two different brains. One that is the saboteur brain, that where that negative talk is always situated, and the other is the sage. And as you talk, Kim, I think about it as Christians, just in a Christian sense. I said the sage is the Holy Spirit guiding us and directing us. And on the other side, that saboteur brain is the side where the enemy comes in and sow the tears and keep telling us that you're not good enough. You can't reach that. You can't do that. Why are you doing that? Why are you going there? And all of that. But I know we're going to come to that, because I'm almost driven to ask you, how do we overcome? How do we get to stay on the safe side? Can that really happen where we're always staying on one side and trying to not go on the other side? How do we do that?
Well, I don't know if it's realistic to think that we could always be in our sage brain, because we're we're mortals, and we're imperfect, and we live in a mortal world. And so we're going to experience fear and stress and anxiety. The trick is that as we improve our mental fitness, as we do the gym work to improve that mental fitness, we're able to switch from our saboteur brain to our sage brain much more quickly than we could before. And so it's a matter of mental fitness. The more we exercise those muscles, the faster we can get from survival mode to sage mode. And there's I mean the work of positive intelligence has a very simple way to do that. And so what we do is, on those neural pathways, as we build up that mental muscle, we're able to go more into sage brain and build those neural pathways over to our sage brain more. It doesn't mean we won't ever be in in saboteur mode, but we're able to get out of that and back into sage much more quickly.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. And as we continue talking about the saboteurs, because they are the detriment, they are the that where all of that negativity sits. They are the limiting beliefs. There is a saboteur that is called the hyper rational, and there is one that is called the victim. Talk
Mm-hmm.
to us about those two saboteurs, who are they, and how they show up.
The hyper rational thinks that all decisions, everything you do needs to be done with the rational mind and not with feelings or emotions. That the hyper rational kind of looks down maybe on feelings and emotions, doesn't feel they're valuable, thinks they kind of get in the way, and so tries to be very, very fact-based and logical at the expense of those human feelings that make life so wonderful. And so the hyper rational would have us think that those feelings, the feelings of love and all of those wonderful things are not very important. And that, as you know, can get us into trouble. The victim is just what it says. The victim is kind of a woe is me type of character. And why is this happening to me? Why do people treat me this way? The victim can act like a martyr, and they use that to the victim uses that to get love and attention. So they will cry on someone's shoulder and say, "Oh dear, all these horrible things are happening to me," in hopes that that person will smother them with love and attention. And so the victim kind of makes us powerless. We feel powerless when the victim is in charge. Like we can't change anything. We don't have the ability to change anything.
Wow. Scary, isn't it? In
Yes.
any one of those two positions you're in, it's rather scary. As you talked also, I thought about um how these saboteurs, many of them can show up in your life at different points. It's not just one operating. Today you can have the victim showing up, and tomorrow you can have the the hyper rational showing up and saying, well, don't even bother pay that any mind. Don't give him any sympathy. And all of that, like pushing the emotions out. Think about this rationality. And when you think about it though, Kim, isn't it sometimes, and I guess we're gonna come to that question where we're gonna ask whether these help you to get to this state of success. But I want to talk a little bit about two other ones of the saboteurs, the restless saboteur and the controller. How does those two show up, and who are they?
The restless shows up by never being happy with what's going on right now, always looking for something else. For example, um, the family may be playing a game, but the if someone there has the restless saboteur, may be thinking, well, maybe we'd have more fun if we were playing a different game, or maybe we should do something different. Just jumping back and forth, trying to find that magic bullet of happiness, but just jumping from thing to thing and not ever really following through on things. The controller feels like they need to make sure everything goes just the way they think it should. And if it doesn't, they get really anxious and stressed out. And the controller shows up a lot in marriages where one partner feels like they need to make sure that the other one does things just the way they want them, and all the anxiety and stress that can cause. But it's pretty much just what it says, controller. And if the controller loses control, that's very stressful and makes him very anxious.
Wow. This is indeed some powerful information that is being shared here. And I'm sure as Kim talk, we can all identify one or more of those saboteurs that show up in our life daily. He talked about the controller, must always be in charge. The restless, moving to the next thing. This is just not enough. You talked about the hyper rational. Everything must be laid out in a certain way, must be rational. And you talked about the victim, always in that place of feeling sorry for self or for others. Those are really, really some negative ways and some negative belief thoughts, saboteurs that really hijack our lives. And if we don't know about them, we will be suffering with them for years and years. I really appreciate this conversation, Kim, because we're learning so much at the fireside tonight. But let me move on because we want to make sure that we leave about 15 minutes or so to make sure we have those questions coming. If you have questions, please go ahead and drop them in the chat, or you can wait until we open the floor to ask your question. But please, we use the chat in this room. You can start dropping your questions there. So based on the definition you gave earlier of the sage, which I consider to be my guide, my Holy Spirit, and the saboteur, who I consider to be that one that drives me on the negative side. But is there not a way where both of these can push you into achieving success? Because sometimes I believe that even the worst situation can push you. Am I correct?
Yes, yes, you are correct. The saboteurs can lead you to some success. For example, I'll just take the hyperachiever. I mean, there's lots of people with a very strong hyperachiever that have achieved great things. The difference is you can never be happy with when you're using your saboteurs to reach success. The sage, on the other hand, so the saboteurs, if you think about that, they push you. And if you think about the sage brain, the five sage powers, they pull you toward success, but because you're using positive emotions, love, empathy, creativity, innovation, um, you end up, when you reach that level of success that you're looking for, you can also be happy, and not only happy at the end, but happy all the way through. Shirzad talks a lot in the book about, he coaches CEOs from Fortune 500 companies, a lot of them through the years. And he talks about how many of them were billionaires, very, very successful people, but also very, very unhappy because their success was driven by their saboteurs. So not only can the sage powers bring you greater success, but they also bring happiness along with it.
That's such a great example because even when we look around us on persons who are in uh, high positions, and just sometimes the little that we know about their lives, we realize that they got to where they are by being pushed by the saboteurs instead of the sage. And where they are most of the times, you can literally discern the unhappiness in them. And so I really can see through the answer to that both of them can push you forward. But what's the end result?
Yeah, and when you're operating with the saboteurs, even though you might be successful, you're so unhappy. But not only that, but you're making everyone around you unhappy also. So a business leader, for example, leading a company through the saboteur brain, is going to possibly find success, but his team isn't going to be happy, and he's not going to be happy, and they're going to be looking for another place to work.
And this is so deep as you talk about looking for another place. We have people in workplaces, they've quite quit the turnover is high. The people are just coming and going. Um, Leadership is out of control, and sometimes it goes back to who is leading. What side of the brain is this person leading from? Are they
Exactly.
leading from the saboteur brain, or are they leading from the sage brain? Or where is the balance for that matter? Because we don't get to always use one side of the brain all the time. Is that correct?
That's correct. But we can, again, once we develop those mental muscles, we can choose pretty quickly to change over into sage brain. And so for a leader that's leading from their sage brain, they're going to make once they're going to make mistakes. They're going to maybe discipline someone too harshly or whatever. But when they get back in their sage brain, they're going to evaluate that, and then they're going to go and do what it takes to make amends and to make that situation right. And when they do that, that's a great trust builder. So it's not always horrible that sometimes we act out of saboteurs. If we're able to get into our sage and then make it right, that actually will build lots more trust with our team as we do that.
Hmm. Excellent point again. As we come down, we want strategies, we want ideas, we want the know-how. What are some ways that persons can use to make sure that they stay most of the time? I won't say overcome the saboteurs, because we may not be able to rightly overcome them, but we can manage them. What are some ways to manage these saboteurs, or to make sure that I know in his book he talked about doing these PQ reps. What are some ways that persons can use to make sure that they keep the saboteurs under control and feed the sage?
Well, I would first say learn to recognize your saboteurs, and that's very simple, just by the fact that you just pay attention to how you're feeling. If you're feeling fear or anxiety or stress or any of those negative emotions, that's your saboteurs, and you can recognize that and just get in the habit of recognizing what's happening and saying, oh, that's my judge, or that's my pleaser, and I don't need you today. Just kind of just recognizing that is really the first step. The next thing is the PQ reps, and basically what that is weightlifting for your brain. And so PQ reps are basically anything that keeps you out of your thinking brain and focused on sensations. So one of them that he has us do a lot is rubbing your fingers together, and you rub your fingers together with such a tension that you can feel the ridges on your fingers, and you're not thinking about anything else. You're paying direct attention to what that feels like. Or you might pay attention to your breathing. You might notice the temperature of air as it goes into your nose and the temperature of air that comes out. But you have to just really focus. And as your mind is always going to try to wander, but you just bring it back and start focusing on your breath again. There's hundreds of ways to do it. When I'm driving, I will, with my hands on the steering wheel, I will feel the steering wheel and I will concentrate on what that feels like. When you do that, that's exercising that pathway that takes you out of the survival brain into the sage brain. It seems way too simple. And for for a long time when I was learning about the work, I would think it can't possibly be this simple, but it is that simple. If they take an MRI of your brain when you're doing a PQ rep, they will see increased activity in your sage brain, and they will see decreased activity in your survival brain. And so I try, the goal is to do 100. Like if you do one rep would be like 10 seconds or something. And so if you can do like 50 to 100 in a day, you're going to make really fast progress toward making that those neural pathways much stronger. The challenge with personal development or training in a corporate setting is that they're based on insight, but lasting change is only 20% insight. It's 80% mental muscle. And so by doing these PQ reps, we build our mental muscle, and that's what gives us the power to stay in our sage brain.
You better say that again. And lasting change is 80% mental muscle.
Yes, and 20%
Wow.
insight. So when we go to a seminar, for example, we get all this insight and we're so excited about it. But then we go home and a week later, we've forgotten all about it. The reason for that is because we haven't built up that mental muscle. That seminar was only about insight. And so we have to build that other 80% of mental muscle so that we can take that insight and actually implement it.
And I understand earlier when you talk about the mind can be doing so many things. So even doing that focus, rubbing your fingers together is to bring back the thoughts in
Yes,
one place. And
yes.
it reminds me of meditation when during the process of meditation, they say focus on your breath. And it's a challenging thing to do when everything around you, you're hearing the sound over there, that's happening there, but they want you to stay focused just on your breath in order to properly bring your mind into a place of control. And it's not the easiest thing to do because you're remembering what you need to do tomorrow. What happened last week? The children gone to school. Somebody said this at work and it's constantly going. So it's not the easiest thing to keep under control. And that's what we're talking about, those saboteurs that keep moving all over the place. But it is possible.
It is possible, and just from my personal experience, that over the time that I've been intentionally doing mental weightlifting, those PQ reps every day, I have noticed a dramatic difference in my ability to come out of saboteur thinking and into my sage brain. It really is um, quite astonishing how effective it is over time. And I just it's kind of a skill that somehow has become forgotten in our culture, but and I think that a lot of people and even communities and nations are so stuck in saboteur mode. That's why there's so much conflict, because we're fighting with these negative emotions all the time. If we can get people to be able to exercise those mental muscles and get into their sage brain where love and empathy and creativity reside, what can we do to make this world a better place if we're motivated, if our actions are flowing from those positive emotions? I just think it'd be phenomenal what we can do together if we can build those mental muscles and be able to work from our sage brain.
That's such a powerful thought right there, Kim. Because, when you look around, and sometimes I wonder, why is everybody so angry? Like, and when I say everybody, I'm exaggerating. Which one is exaggerating? Which one of the saboteurs is the one that exaggerates? But when you think about it, everybody is angry. Everybody is stressed. I was listening to something 2 nights ago, and it says the man was saying at least 60% of the illnesses are mental. When he said mental, it's connected to
Correct.
some kind of mental airway. It's not something that you pick up elsewhere. It's something, if it's stress, if it's anxiety, the illness comes from stress, it comes from anxiety. Even overeating, he was saying, when people overeat, most time it has an underlying place where it's coming from. It could be they are dissatisfied, so they just eat. They're stressed, so they just eat. They're angry, they just eat. So it flows from a mental place. Most of the illnesses, cancer, diabetes, a lot of the illnesses that are really challenging illnesses flows from that place. And as you said, what a world it would be if we were able to get all of this, or at least a good percentage, under control. What a world it would be.
I I agree with you so much. We're so used to facing our problems like this. That's the saboteur brain trying to solve problems. The sage brain does this. And we can do this as people. We can, when we're the sage brain using love and empathy, we can solve any problems that come our way and be happy while we're doing it.
But the very way you put your hand, it's like a prayer. It's
Yes,
like a coming into agreement.
yes.
Wow, that there's a different way. It doesn't have to be fight and a struggle. So long as
The the way of the sage is ease and flow. And if we're not in ease and flow, you know, you've experienced when there's difficulties in human communication or human relationships, when we go to love and empathy and we solve those problems like this, we just grow together, and we feel so good. And it's just, but when we're in that anxiety and fear and stress, it's no wonder we're sick, right? Just like you were saying, because those emotions just wreak havoc on our bodies. But the positive emotions make us healthier. And